Hi, it's Morgan with 1455. It is our mission to advance the art and craft of the written word and to build a dynamic and innovative creative community. We offer a variety of free online and in person programs, which are fully supported by our sponsors and by viewers like you. If you would like to make a donation of any amount, please visit 1455litarts.org and click support. Your contribution will be greatly appreciated. We'll see you on the next one.
Hey everybody, it's Sean Murphy with 1455. Welcome back to another installment of the 1455 interview. We usually like to give the authors a safety net. I'm thrilled to report that today's victim has not reviewed the question, so we're going to get spontaneous, answers to some of these, probing questions. So let's see how this goes. But I'm really happy for two reasons. One, this is the first time I've had the chance to interact with Stephen, but also this is kind of a tune-up of sorts for the 1455 event tomorrow night, where I'll be talking to Stephen and a handful of other authors from the amazing Alone Together anthology, which we've already talked about in previous installments. When I put this video up on the site, I'll include links to that. But yeah, tomorrow night we're going to be talking about the COVID anthology, which is arguably or inarguably one of the real bright spots in a crazy year. But let me introduce our special guest. As a journalist and novelist, Stephen P. Kiernan has had more than 4 million words in print. He's author of the novels Universe of Two, The Baker's Secret, The Hummingbird, and The Curiosity. He's also written the nonfiction books Last Rites and Authentic Patriotism. His work has won more than 40 awards, including the George Polk Award, the Scripps Howard National Journalism Award for Public Service Reporting, and Joseph L. Brechner Center's Freedom of Information Award. He's also lectured and consulted nationally on hospice and end-of-life care, and he lives in Vermont. Stephen, wow, not an unimpressive resume. It's an honor to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
You know, I worry sometimes that it sounds more like an obituary than a bio, but thank you. I'm delighted to be with you.
Great. Well, okay, as promised, I'm going to put us on the clock for 1455 and we can jump in. I'm so giddy that you haven't had a chance to look at these yet, so we'll be able to catch you in real time.
I should have had a cup of coffee
or something stronger.
Yeah.
Stephen, what's the first book that made you want to be a writer, or a book that profoundly changed your life?
Black Beauty. Black Beauty was a story about sort of the first book about animal rights, and it was a story about the life of a horse. But the reason that it moved me, that it made me love stories and books, and it was that it made me cry. It was the first book that ever made me cry. When she had that owner that was cruel, it was so painful for me, and I was, I don't know, maybe 11 years old, and I thought, wow, that's an amazing thing that I'm reading these marks on paper, and they made me cry. Black Beauty. Anna Sewell, I think, was the author.
Okay. Well, I know that my wife is going to love that, because I'm pretty sure that was her favorite book.
I've always loved your wife. We haven't met, but I'm very fond of her nonetheless.
You guys already have so much in common, right?
True.
Okay. Along those lines, who would you say your most profound artistic influence is, if you could name one?
One?
Or a couple.
Man, that's hard.
It's
a couple.
Impossible.
Okay. All right. I think that Stephen Stills has been an influence on me artistically. I think Michael Hedges, guitarists have been. But in terms of writers, you know, I mean, nothing surprising like the great classic writers. You know, look at Dickens, you know, Balzac. I don't know. You know, I feel like any name that I come up with will sound so pretentious because they're so much greater than me. I remember like the first person I read where I said I need to read everything that person ever published, and that was Knut Hamsun. A complicated character, but I wrote some amazing stuff. Early winner of the Nobel Prize for Literature, and a big influence on me when I was in like late teens, early 20s.
What would you, for someone that is not familiar with that work, is there a particular book you recommend?
The one that really got me was a love story called Pan, like the god Pan. But he also wrote The Growth of the Soil, which is a great sodbusters story, and Hunger, which is almost Kafkaesque. But Pan is it. Pan was the one that I read over and over, and you know, you can read it in a sitting. It's probably 90 minutes. But oh, just great stuff.
Outstanding. Okay, how you already mentioned music, so that's a good tee up. what is an album or movie or both that you recommend without reservation? Again, not a trick. There's a million answers, but what's one that jumps to mind as far as something you can recommend without any hesitation?
Beethoven's Sixth Symphony, pastoral one. I think it tells you about how an art form can create all kinds of things in your imagination that are not in that art form. So it's his pastoral symphony. It's violins, right? It's primarily violin symphony, but yet you will see landscape, you will see horses pulling carriages, you will see all of these things, these images that come up. And don't take my word for it, just put it on and listen to Beethoven's Sixth if it's any kind of a decent performance of it. And so much is evoked by the music. And part of the reason that I believe in that, why it's important to me, is because the more I write, the less I want to tell and the more I want to invite. That is, I don't want to say to the reader, here's everything that happens in this moment. I want to say, here are a couple of details, and I want you to imagine the rest of it, right? Galway Kinnell once said, this is only half the transaction, right? I really want the reader's imagination to be engaged more. And so I think about that piece of music and how much it conjures in me, and it makes me not become a minimalist, but just give the reader enough and not too much. So their imagination is part of how they engage.
So I love and second that assessment, and I appreciate that. Usually when Beethoven is invoked symphony-wise, it's the third, the fifth, or the ninth. So the fact that and even the seventh, I think. So the fact
seventh,
that
oh man, second movement of the seventh, it's, I mean, one of the better things humanity has ever done, no question. But it doesn't bring images in your mind like the sixth does, you know?
I love it. Now we're gonna have a whole separate interview talking about music, clearly. For me, the piano sonatas are the ultimate expression because it's just one man and one instrument. But the fact that you invoke the sixth, I'm with you on that very much. So,
you know, it was a gift I gave to myself that my last novel, Universe of Two, this one has a musician in it, and she plays the organ, and I got to have music all the way through the book, and that was really, really fun.
That's great. That's great. Well, there goes another book to add to your list at home, and certainly on my list for sure.
Did I sneak in a commercial there? Sorry.
Gotta be absolutely. It's welcome here. If not here, when and where, right?
Hey, true enough.
All right, here's a tough one if you haven't prepared. Again, first thing that comes to your mind, what would you nominate as one of the best first or last lines of any book ever?
Oh boy. I mean, and I alone have survived to tell thee, right? Pretty amazing last line. And you don't know about me without you have read, you know, I can't quote it, but the opening to Huckleberry Finn, also pretty great. But I wish I could think of something more contemporary. I'm drawing a blank. It's too bad I didn't think of that in advance. I'm a big fan of opening lines and closing lines. I think, you know, it freaked my brother out when the last Harry Potter book came out, and I went and I said, his scar didn't hurt anymore. He said, that's the last sentence. You are so messed up. You went and read that. And I said, you know, I wanted to see like if she could deliver. And the answer is that she delivered, right? It told me the whole book was going to work in some way that the last thing was that his scar, the lightning scar, didn't hurt Harry Potter's head anymore.
Yep.
So I think it's more like I'm overwhelmed with options on this because there's so many that I've loved.
I've said, you know, these questions are not chosen by chance, but I've also kind of sardonically noted that these are easy questions, but for writers, it's like, which limb would you hack off rather than try to name your favorite writer? It's
exactly.
This is what we live. This is what we live for. And non-writers can't really appreciate that, but you know, they're lost.
Well, I'll give up a toe for this one then.
How about an underrated author that you'd like to give a shout out to, wish people would recognize more widely?
You know, I'm thinking of friends. I'm thinking of friends who have way more talent than me, and that I wish had huge readership. Deborah Immergut should have a gigantic readership. John Mark should have a great readership. Tom Barbash should have a great readership. Everyone should read Georgia by by my really good friend. I'm spacing on her name because I'm going too fast now. By Dawn Tripp, who I love.
Yeah,
fantastic novel. You know, I also like sort of the backlist, you might say, of some people. Like, we all know that Ken Kesey wrote Cuckoo's Nest, but a far superior book is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. He wrote, but
Sometimes a Great Notion.
Thank you. Yes, but he wrote Sometimes a Great Notion, spectacular book.
Yes.
right? And sometimes the backlist is even better. So it's like more like people that you love finding that the second one or the third one.
Kind of like someone graduating from the third or fifth symphony to the sixth. I think we've developed a sub-theme to this conversation.
Aren't we though?
The delight of going deeper into an artist's oeuvre.
This is turning out just the way we rehearsed it.
Right? I didn't have to feed you the questions. Yeah, it's going swimmingly. All right, I think you're going to like this one, and we already tipped it a little bit. I enjoy asking people this. Why have you not read Moby Dick? Or if you have, is there a classic that you've been meaning to get around to?
You know, everyone has their white whale book, you know, and I'm going to talk about a classic that I've tried a couple times and I just can't do it. I have tried 3 different translations of Remembrance of Things Past. I even tried reading it aloud to myself at one point, and I just can't do it. I have a pretty good, you know, an iron stomach about this stuff. I can put up with a lot, you know, I've read a lot of the big ones. And for some reason, I just don't engage with that. And but you know, War and Peace, oh man, I loved it. Anna Karenina, that's great. All the Dickens, you know, I love me a big fat novel where I'm going to get completely lost in it for a while. I've loved some really long biographies as well. The Jackson Pollock biography, the Harry Truman biography. That are just these definitive stories. Oh, the amazing Ron Powers wrote Mark Twain biography. Oh, it's just like a Bible. It's so good. It's so good. And I forget what the question was.
that it's okay for young writers out there to not read Proust.
Absolutely. Put it aside. I'm a big fan of not finishing books. We're only going to get to read about maybe 3, 4, 5,000 books in our lives. You know, if something is not happening, give it 100 pages, put it aside. No guilt.
Don't you find as you get older too that the patience, like there's a sense that there is less time, so there's less patience for something that doesn't work right away?
Yes, yes, I completely agree. I feel like I don't want to spend time on something where somebody hasn't done the work to care for me, to give me something to pull me along, to give me enough to hold on to. If it's too much about them, I rarely finish poems that are about poems.
Right on. I hear you. All right, so thinking of your own work, if you could say, is there a single theme or topic that your work seeks to address?
You know, I've never had it as a conscious theme, but you know, the subject of mortality, which was a lot of what my nonfiction, my first book was Last Rites, about how to die well, basically. So that has come through, but it hasn't come through as a kind of morbidity. It's more like what we were just talking about, that if you are certain and accept that your life is finite, then it actually makes you value more highly the experiences that you have, even the grief, even the sorrows, because it's a temporary thing. And so it's made me in some ways like a less patient person. The more that I've worked in that field a lot. I spent, I don't know, 15 or 16 years really immersed in the hospice world and end of life care, and writing about it, consulting about it, speaking about it. And I'm convinced, unfortunately, that I will one day die. And so it is really about, like, maybe today is the anniversary of my death. You know, and who knows how many years away it is. Maybe it's 1, maybe it's 35, you know, but it's a finite number. Well, I live in Vermont, and winter is so beautiful here, and summer is so exquisite, and I want so many winters and summers, and I want meals with my sons, and, you know, I mean, just so many things. And the awareness that I have of that time is limited has been a driver for sort of how I write and how my characters behave, and where the books kind of arrive, where my endings are. It's influenced by that.
That's a beautiful response. I appreciate that very much.
Thank you. You know, my parents both died young, and so and my best friend died when he was 27. So I had a premature introduction to these things, and so I think about if my buddy who was 27 when he died, if he was still around now, how much he missed. And so I know I'm going to miss a lot. What the Scots say, be sure to live your life, for you're bound to be a long time dead. Right? So this is it, whether it's the writing or how I behave in my life. I think this is kind of a theme of my existence.
I love it. Well, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Sticking with your writing, I usually conflate the next 2 questions, which is they deal with writing routines and writer's block. Do you have opinions about either, experienced either? Do you have a writing routine to speak of?
I do, and writer's routine is how you beat writer's block, in my belief. Somebody asked me the other day, I get started every day, and I said the answer is I get a cup of coffee and I go down and I open my computer and I begin to work. I have been just writing for a living since January 1st of 1988. And there were lean times in there, but and there were a lot of years in newspapers there. And now it's what I do. It's actually the part of the day I look forward to. I often wake up before any alarm, and just today I woke up at 11 minutes after 5 because I'm raring to go on this rewrite that I'm involved in right now. My writing routine is typically to work in the morning till about noon, and if I can get another session in, then I'll try. But I get awful tired of the chair. I get antsy. And I want to get outside. I want to get active, and there's all the other exigencies of life. But I always, when I'm advising younger writers, what I say is try to make your rituals, your advanced rituals, as small and simple and brief as possible, so that there's the fewest things that need to be in order. There's nothing like working in a newsroom where people are shouting at each other, the phones are ringing, the printer's going, the scanner, all that. And you have to fight to write a complete sentence without interruption, to sort of just make now writing fiction feel like this incredible luxury, this expanse of time. And I've waited 30 years of other kinds of work doing this in the morning before work to get to this point. Like, I'm not going to waste a minute. I'm not going to squander a day if I can avoid it.
Yeah, and so one theme that you won't be surprised to hear that's resurfaced in this relatively young series is this notion that to have writer's block is itself a luxury, because if you want to get the work done, you've got to get the work done.
Look, today I wrote badly. I did not work well today, but tomorrow I can rewrite, and there are good days and bad days for plumbers, and there are good days and bad days for carpenters, and there are good days and bad days. And so, like, letting a block stop you, no, you got to go through it. And also, if you're at the desk, when those times come where you are inspired, where your better self is writing, where your subconscious and conscious mind are aligned, when that happens, you're not doing something else. You're in the chair, at the table, fingers on the keys. And that's where then you can take advantage of those rare moments. You've earned them. You've worked your way to them.
Yes, that's fantastic. How about a setback, artistic or otherwise, that in hindsight puts you on the trajectory that you find yourself on now?
I had a coach years ago who used to say, it is only through suffering that one can achieve pain. My first novel was not bad, and it got 37 rejections. And I know that because there were 37 commercial publishers in the United States at the time. They all said no, and it was not bad. And no, I think I've just been really stubborn. I don't know that any of the setbacks made me better, but I've always been determined to tell stories. And if tomorrow publishing ceased to exist, I would still be a storyteller. And that's just how I'm made. And I did spend a lot of years in other professions, sold computers for a bunch of years. And as I say, I worked in newspapers for a long time, but I was always doing fiction on the side because it's kind of how I make sense of the world. And I don't know. Marvin Bell says writers are people who are helpless not to write. I'm one of them.
That's it. That's a definitive appraisal. I couldn't agree more. And I hope that especially for aspiring writers watching this now, that really sinks in. Without the passion and the drive, there's nothing.
I know so many people who are way, way, way better than me, but they stopped.
That's another theme. I think, like many writers, I can never get enough reading writers talking about writing, and that theme, probably more than anything else. I mean, aside from the obvious, like, to write, you have to write, but this notion of never giving up, and so many that fall by the wayside, that maybe would have had spectacular careers, but we just will never know.
Yeah. Right.
And personally, I think along the lines of some of the things that you've shared, I look at the people that didn't have the opportunity, or their lives were cut short, or any number of genuine obstacles. And I think, how dare I, take this for granted, and how dare I not try harder, because just to be able to try to do it is itself a bit of a blessing.
Well, the thing that you're describing is great, because what you've managed to do with that, how dare I, is you've managed to internalize the guilt that comes from not writing, which is a very, very helpful thing, right? There's always the question about a writer: do you like writing or do you like having written? You know, I'm thinking you're a guy who probably feels pretty well about having written, right? Because how dare I not have written? You know, there are days where I think like I should not have done that. What I did to that poor character today, but I also think it is a kind of compulsion, you know. Nobody ever told me to go sit down and write. My whole life, there was some motor in me that needed to do it. And I think about that when I speak to like a classroom, or I give a lecture at a college or something like that, is I think there are 200 people in this room. 2 of them are hearing me say that, and they've got this little secret flame that they're keeping alive, that is their compulsion. And the others are like, oh, that's very nice, how interesting. But for 2 of them, they're hearing that flame, yeah, if they can just keep it lit and show up and show up and show up and show up. Suddenly, you know, I didn't set out to publish 4 million words. I just wrote them, right? And now my flame is like, I'm living in it. It's given me a house. It's educated my children. I can't believe how lucky I am. I cannot believe how lucky I am.
Well, this is, I think, you've already pretty much summarized it, but maybe elaborate a little bit. The next question is, define or explain what literary success means to you.
I think there are 3 components to it. One is that I put something out that I'm not ashamed of, that I'm proud of, that I think is the best I can do with that idea. And that's just sort of my own system of measurement. And by the time the book comes out and I've been away from it for a while, I see the mistakes. But nonetheless, that's sort of one part. And the other part is, you know, will it pay me enough that I can write another book? And really, that's enough. You know, I live near a lake, and someday it'd be great to have a house on that lake. It's never going to happen, man. Because really all I want is enough so I can keep writing until I'm done, right? Until I'm unable. And the third thing is about the reader experience. And this is the hardest thing to put into words, because it's abstract and it's elusive, but it is an experience that the reader has when they get to the end of a book. And you know, when you're working toward the end of a book, if it's got you, if it's really captured you, that you forget that you're holding a book and you stay up late, and you know, the characters are alive in your mind. And if you have to put it down, when you pick it up a minute later, you know, a day later, 2 days, 5 days later, you pick it up, you're right back in the dream after 2 sentences, and you get to the end and you're heartbroken that it's over, and there's some fulfillment that's occurred when it reaches the end, and you just got to spend the time feeling like that. And I don't think there's a name for that experience for the reader. But I now, because of social media, for all that's terrible about it, I hear from people. And when I hear from people that they had that experience, especially at the end of the novel, I feel like this immense privilege that our imaginations have done some kind of Venn diagram, and the intersection space is just something of beauty. And I don't have, like I said, I would love to have words about it. It's a thing I've even only just begun to talk about. But I think it's kind of sacred.
Indeed, and listen, Stephen, I want to tip my chapeau to you. I think you really have you've really articulated the 2 kind of dominant themes, not only of this series, but in my humble opinion, kind of the mystery of this process, which is the real compulsion to write no matter what. You alluded to the fact that no one ever told you to write. But also, I think writers are not being fully honest if there's not a real genuine desire to connect and have some kind of shared experience. So what you're talking about is at once very simple, but also very profound. This idea of getting the work done, doing the hard work, but with the end result being something bigger than the author's achievement because it's being shared. And that's, to me, the essence of storytelling when it's successful.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, I'm really a storyteller. They use the word. That's really what I am. You know, people are annoyed sometimes in conversation with me because I don't really do the usual back and forth. I listen for a while, then I have a story to tell about that. You can't help it.
old school raconteur, as they used to call it.
I don't know. I think it's an Irishman with a lot of blarney, actually. It's what it's called.
Well, that too. Well, that was almost a mic drop moment, but our final question, I think a good note to end on for this conversation is, if you had a 1 minute or so exhortation for an aspiring writer that's looking for advice, what would you tell them?
Well, I think I said a lot of it, but I want to tell a story. I was at Breadloaf, and John Gardner was doing a workshop on the compulsion of writing, and there were 100 people in the room, and I was 21, and I felt like I was 4 compared with all the writers around me. And he did an exercise after, like, it was an hour and a half time slot, something like that. We were like an hour into it, and he did an exercise, and he said, I want you to write about a first person monologue, and you've just murdered your lover by a lake, and you're not allowed to say murder, lover, or lake. Go. And for some reason I was like, oh, that's so easy. And I just like wrote something off. And then he said, okay, who wants to read theirs? And these people who are published, people who are, a generation older than me, they're getting up and they're reading. And so I just showed mine to the person next to me. And she just kind of looked at me, and then she raised her hand, and he called on her next. And she said, no, him. I raised my hand so he could read it. And so John says, get up and read. And so I stand up like, this is the first time I've ever, like I told you, it's a little flame. I'm like terrified, right? And my family, my parents think I should not be there. That writing is going to make me broke, and all these, all of this stuff. And I stand up and I read this, I don't know, 10 sentences about murdering my lover by the lake. And he says, what's your name? And I said, Stephen. And he said, Stephen, thank you for a piece of writing. Class dismissed. I was done for. 21 years old, and I was done for. Somebody had heard it and valued it. And there were a lot of years where nobody valued it but me. But I'd had that little pearl. Man, I held on to it for a long time. And by the time I there was a time when I didn't need it anymore, because I'd found like the pearl in me, or whatever, the thing in me that needed to write that little moment, and that did it with care. And now, I just, not that long ago, I turned 60 years old, and I think, wow, I have just been telling stories for so long, and I want to live forever. I've still got so many stories I want to tell. I still have, I know what my next novel is the minute this one's done. It's going to be like the end and a fresh sheet in the typewriter. It's just great. I don't get tired. I get more energy from it. And there is real joy in that. There's immense sorrow in an artistic life, of course. There's, deserts of solitude. But they have their meaning and their gifts and their beauties too. And then there are the moments when you hear from a reader who got to the end of your novel and was blown away by it. And man, that's the stuff. That's the good stuff.
Well, I think it's safe to say that there's nothing phoned in about your responses. There's nothing genuine passion and inspiration. I know I'm inspired, and I'd like to think that anybody watching this is gonna see and feel that energy and want to emulate it. So what a gift.
I don't know, Sean, I feel like I got off a windy on you, but I hope it's helpful.
I would say the Blarney was purposeful, succinct, and often devastating in its profundity.
Thank you.
So that's my assessment.
Wow.
Stephen, I thank you for being here. Again, this series is certainly meant to be fun and a little bit lighthearted, but boy, time after time, talking to what I would call, without any pretense or irony, real writers, people that do this for a living and take it very seriously, these nuggets of wisdom that come forth, these nuggets of inspiration, but also just another reminder that this is our lives, and this is why it's so important.
Sean, it's been a real pleasure chatting with you, and I think that about an hour from now, I'm gonna have a bunch of really good first sentences of novels for you.
Well, so fortunately, I'm going to see you in a little over 24 hours.
True.
We can have a little sidebar and knock that out of the way, but also you can shoot me an email and I'll amend when I put this on the website. we get that in. But I think you did just fine. I also want to acknowledge that you didn't see the questions beforehand. Just crushed it. So a true pro.
Better that way. Thanks so much. All right, we'll see you tomorrow. Real pleasure.
You got it. All right, thank you, sir. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, peace.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you follow us on our social media channels to stay up to date with what's new for 1455. And also, we would like to ask for your support. We depend on champions like you to keep us going. Visit 1455litarts.org and click support to make a contribution in any amount. We'll see you soon.